Kyle LeBlanc is at work right now. He's talking on the phone with his wife, Gray. She is upset because he's been working too much lately. Fairly common between married couples, but their case is a bit extreme. They have left their home in Louisiana because Kyle came to work in the city of Magnitogorsk, another state, you might think. Think again, it's in Russia. No wonder she's upset to be home alone all the time. The best he can do is to call her on the phone all the time. Late for dinner again. He's now calling from the car on his way home. There's a heavy storm in the city, and while they're talking, the lights go out. That's when we see Gray is not alone. There is a man outside, standing right in front of the window and looking at her. Their call is interrupted for a moment, and she takes the opportunity to get a flashlight, mumbling about how much she hates Russia. Kyle calls again, and they begin to plan a short vacation to bring back the romance. But the moment she steps into the kitchen, she's attacked by that stranger. In the car, Kyle can only hear her screaming in terror and begging the man to stop. As he keeps beating her, he decides to hang up and call the police, but his Russian is terrible, and the dispatcher can't understand what he says. Now the intruder is holding her down over the couch. She fights back as fiercely as she can, until he takes out a pocket knife. Kyle is driving dangerously fast, trying to get back home in time to save her. The stranger leaves a split second before Kyle arrives, desperately rushing into the living room. It's already too late. His beloved wife is lying lifeless on the couch. He screams in pain for a moment, and then runs outside, just in time to see a suspect getting on a bus. Running as fast as he can, Kyle manages to make the bus stop for him. And when he hops on, we confirm that this is really the guy he's looking for. They start punching each other while everyone else tries to get out of their way. The passengers leave the bus as the fight gets wilder, and the murderer gets his knife again, shattering the rear window. They end up in the middle of the street, and Kyle gets hit by a motorcycle. The killer hears police sirens coming closer and quickly hides. Then he makes a run for it while the cops are busy arresting Kyle. He frantically screams that they have the wrong man. But they do eventually catch the right one, and we learn that his name is Mr. Kovic. Kyle makes sure to attend the trial, but it doesn't go as he expected. Due to police negligence and lack of evidence, the judge finds the defendant not guilty, and he is free to go. The prosecutor explains that Kovic is from a very wealthy family and the justice system is on his side. They never really stood a chance to make him pay for what he did, and Kovic shows absolutely no remorse at all. Kyle simply can't let his wife's murderer walk away like that. Still in the courthouse, he grabs a gun from one of the guards and takes justice into his own hands. Now it's Kyle's turn as a defendant, and his trial goes very differently. The fact that the crime happened inside a courthouse aggravates the judge, as it shows Kyle has no respect for the law. The fact that he's an outsider only makes it worse. He is sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. And that would be Kravovy Prison, which is not exactly a 5-star hotel. It's a maximum security facility full of hardened criminals. General Khrushchev is in charge of the orientation speech. The first thing he says is that lots of inmates have tried to escape Kravovy, but no one has lived to tell that story. Not satisfied with the verbal explanation, there is a real-life example right in front of them. Dima is one of those unfortunate optimists who tried to run away. He is placed on the ground tight in front of them, as a living reminder of what not to do. What a warm welcome. One of the newcomers is also American. His name is Billy Cooper, and he looks very scared. Khrushchev wants to know his age, and he says he's 21. The general only replies that it's a shame. Inside the prison, the arriving inmates hand in their belongings. One of the guards comes to pester Kyle right away, picking on him for not speaking Russian. He says the wedding ring must go in the tray as well. Kyle begins to explain the situation and quickly learns that this is not the best idea around here. Appealing to a guard's humanity only gets you to a 404 page or something like that. Beaten with a stick, he falls over, and that reveals something else he was secretly trying to keep. The guard pulls a photograph of Gray from his underwear, carelessly tossing it. He removes the wedding ring from Kyle's finger. At least he manages to crawl to the picture and retrieve it quietly enough. Poor Billy is terrified to watch all this, even more when his hair is gone. After a collective hygiene session, there's a roll call at the dorms. Kyle watches that guard playing with the wedding ring around his middle finger. The beds are then assigned to each prisoner. Kyle takes the picture of his wife and his mind wanders to a much better time, when they were having fun together at the swimming pool. We can bet he now regrets those long hours at work, right? Just saying. In the middle of the night, a couple of officers enter the dorm. They wake Billy up, saying he must follow them somewhere. The boy tries to ask what this is about, but they tell him to keep his voice down. Of course, nobody is really sleeping now, but they're all frozen in terror and don't ask any questions. Billy is taken to a different cell and thrown inside with a more seasoned inmate, Andre. The officers tell them to have fun and shut the door. The whole place is filled with the painful screams. A new day begins, full of new horrors to unveil. Something as simple as brushing your teeth is anything but simple at Krvavi. Passing by the corridors in line, Kyle gets to see Billy when they open the other cell. He is totally devastated, while the older inmate waltzes into the line in a great mood. Kyle can't help but think of Kovik's evil grin and compare the two villains in his mind. Standing in that guy's way for too long is enough reason for a fight. When the guards come, of course it's Kyle they decide to blame. He gets put in solitary confinement in an utterly disgusting place. Days and nights begin to blend in together, and his only human contact is the guard's hand putting his bowl through the hole. Memories of happy times with Gray is all he has to cling to. The situation changes a little bit when a small insect comes to visit. Gray used to believe in an afterlife, but not really in heaven. She was convinced that each of us gets to return as something else. Kyle chooses to believe in that possibility. Gray's beautiful smile may be gone forever, but her soul may be inside a small creature like that, and she still gets to spread her wings. For a grieving husband, any glimmer of hope is more than welcome. The insects help him get through the unthinkable ordeal of that dirty dungeon until he's allowed to leave. Taking him to his cell, that same guard mentions an arrangement that could be made. Kyle's life could be a lot easier for the right price. He ignores that for now, more focused on his cellmate. They call him inmate 451, and his back is covered in scars. He seems to be touched by a tad of OCD as well, which is hard to condemn in such a place. There's a small lamp on the desk next to his bed, and a pile of books can be seen. We like this guy already. Kyle's time in solitary is seen by the other as some kind of vacation, and while he strongly disagrees, he can see why. A normal day in Krvavi involves many hours of extremely hard work. There are serious consequences for those who attempt to take a break from it, however brief. Visiting day comes and he gets to see Paul, his brother-in-law. He tells him that Gray's body has been sent to Louisiana and he found a nice resting place for her, just as requested. He asks Kyle how things are going for him, but he doesn't answer him. Paul reminds him that this is a Russian prison and the guards can be easily bribed. That could get him out of all sorts of trouble. Speaking of trouble, that guy who had a fight with Kyle doesn't seem to think they're even yet. Luckily, his aim really sucks, so his attempt to hurt Kyle starts a conflict between factions instead. Billy says this kind of stuff is really scary and Kyle agrees. They begin to talk. Billy says his sentence is just little more than a year, but that's because he didn't really do anything wrong. He was out partying with a girl who drank too much, and then she drove a car into a restaurant. Even though he wasn't behind the wheel, he was charged with gross negligence to private property. Another inmate overhears them and comes closer to introduce himself. His name is Malachi, and he recognizes Kyle from the newspapers. In his opinion, Kovik only got what he deserved. Billy agrees, but he looks slightly scared of Kyle now that he knows he's in for murder. Malachi also knows about Andre. He is from the Russian mafia, but he's not their leader inside. Believe it or not, the boss is the short dude in a silly hat. His name is Bolt. These guys enjoy full protection from the guards. Malachi says Kyle can come to him if he needs anything. His free piece of advice is that he should change cells and get rid of that nutjob, inmate 451. But wait, we liked this guy. Are we wrong? Too soon to say. That same night, Kyle has a nightmare about Gray's death, and he ends up screaming in his sleep. He wakes up with a heavy hand on his face and almost has a heart attack. 451 is not a fan of noisy people in his library. Time goes by, and the Americans have their table now, like in Mean Girls. Malachi is both their leader and their dealer. Andre stops by occasionally to spit on stuff and stare angrily. Taking Malachi's advice, Kyle decides to pay to get put in another cell. The guard takes his money but says it's not enough. Until he can get more, he'll have to make do with 451. Meanwhile, something is going on in the yard. It's the Sparka, which Malachi explains as some kind of fight club therapy. It's supposed to be an outlet for the inmates' repressed violence, but it's nothing but entertainment for the general and his friends. Safely watching the battle from the window of his office, the high officers are betting on the inmates as if they were gamecocks. The inmate who presents the fight is a natural-born performer and puts on a great show to warm up the crowd. Andre is fighting today, and when it starts, we can see there are no rules whatsoever. In fact, the only rule that seems to be in place is that they must stop with the bell. Andre manages to break that one rule, and the factions invade the arena to complain, which shows this whole thing is a terrible idea. From the window, the general makes hand gestures to indicate his orders. Dude probably thinks he's some kind of Roman emperor. After the horror show, Malachi says 451 never fights. He gets to refuse because he's useful to the guards. Everyone is so afraid of him that the second bed in his cell works as a spare solitary when the main one is occupied. A few days later, a random guy from Bolt's gang comes after Kyle with a shovel for no apparent reason. Kyle apologizes to the psycho and gets out of his way, but the guy strikes him anyway, and he can't hold back the knee-jerk reaction to punch him back. The guards calmly watch the fight until Bolt himself decides it's over. One of them tells Kyle that this is not America. There's no room for heroes. The second trip to the hole finally changes him. When he gets out, he begins to prepare. And not only physically, he starts to read 451's journals and gets inspired by them, although the author himself is not very happy to see the transformation. In a few months, Kyle looks like a different man. He's ready for the Sparka, and his first opponent is no other than Andre. Everyone thinks he'll lose because he has less experience, but he more than compensates for that with pure insanity. Even the guards are shocked, and the general regrets having invited his little son to watch this one. Andre does not survive the fight. Back into his cell, 451 has no more wise words for him. He has become an animal, which is good for business here in Krvavi. Kyle becomes one of the most respected fighters, earning everyone's respect in and out of the ring. His cellmate is the only one worried about his lost soul. During an annual celebration, a Russian named Valya introduces himself and provokes Kyle. He only stops when Bolt intervenes. 451 tells him that Valya was transferred from another jail just to fight Kyle. At night, the festivities continue, and Billy takes the opportunity to escape. But the guards are waiting for him because Malachi tipped them off in exchange for the medication he needs. The boy's punishment is to spend the night with Valya. What happens to him is so extreme that the boy doesn't make it. His last words to Kyle are that he can't let this place turn him into a monster. He needs to remember the man he once was. Every time he wins a fight, it's actually a victory for the prison itself. That has a profound effect on Kyle. When the Sparka is resumed, everyone gathers to see his big fight against Valya. Lots of money on the table too. Kyle refuses to fight. He takes a beating from the Russian, but does not lift a finger to entertain the gentleman upstairs. As you can imagine, The general is absolutely furious. He makes sure he gets punished in such a way that makes it an example to everyone. But that plan totally backfires. Hung by his arms for a long period, Kyle's determination is so steady that it becomes contagious. All the inmates start to believe that they can fight the power as well. Meanwhile, we find out where 451 got his name from. His revenge methods usually involve fire, as we see by the way he deals with Malachi, which is exactly the same thing he did to his school teacher so many years ago, after that man put him in a similar situation as Billy was before. At the next Sparka, the general is furious to hear that no one is fighting. Bolt tells the guards that all the other factions have united, refusing to obey them. They're just too many for the thugs to bully or the guards to punish, so there will be no fight. The general is so mad at Kyle that he flies in the scariest fighter in Russia and puts them face to face. The man is a fighting beast who can no longer communicate in words, but Kyle doesn't even need words. He taps a rhythm on the wall and manages to get through the mind behind that mask. The guards have them both at gunpoint and command the fight to continue, but they refuse to obey. Inspired by this unbelievable act of rebellion, the inmates are on fire now. A huge riot begins, and 451 helps Kyle escape the prison, providing him with documents he has secretly kept over years. Arriving in the U.S., those documents prove all the illegal operations that take place at Krvavy on a regular basis. Because of the partnership between 451 and Kyle, the prison is shut down forever. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 2003 movie In Hell by 777 Films, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Lawrence Taylor. So, which character was the most relatable? What would you have done if you were Kyle? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.